Good day, everybody, and welcome to our November 3rd Tuesday at 3 webcast series event covering the price of productivity. I'm Alan Falcon. I'm CEO of Cumulus Global, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day and week to join us here, either if you're attending the live broadcast at the 3TT time slot or you're watching us on demand. We always appreciate your attendance, your attention, your time, and your feedback. So please provide that as well. Before we get into the heart of our content today, our typical reminders that to prevent any background noise from getting in the way, we've muted all of the audio. So if you have any questions along the top or right-hand side of your screen, there are a couple of icons. One of them opens a questions window. Best way to ask me a question, it lets me track to make sure we've got all the questions answered before we go away. And if there's something that's specific to you that's best answered one-on-one offline, I can capture that as well. As with all our webcasts, the session is being recorded. We generally get them up and on our website within 24 hours. We'll send you the link. We'll also send those who registered and weren't able to attend live the link as well. Feel free to share that link with folks who you think might find the content valuable. This webcast series is part of a range of resources we have in our resource center. Please take advantage of the white papers, our other events, our partner events, our technology news aggregation service, our blog, etc. We try and cover topics we believe are relevant. If you have something we're not covering you'd like us to, send me an email and let me know. Happy to add that into the information mix. So we talk about lowering the price of productivity. We're really talking about how do we save money and how do we adjust the overall cost of ownership or the total cost of ownership and operation of your IT services for your business. And we're sort of focused on this because, with the current economic uncertainty, with inflation being high, maybe cooling off, maybe not, with the US economy maybe heading to recession, maybe a slowdown that's not a recession, maybe not, with employment still looking healthy, but wages not moving, a lot of businesses are facing some uncertainty and are going to have to make some decisions. And typically, as we've seen in the past, as a strategic IT service provider to small and mid-sized enterprises, that offers opportunities either to reduce cost while maintaining services, and even if it means changing the way you work a little bit, but it can also be an opportunity to invest and grow and be ready to take advantage of the market and the economy as it becomes healthier, as it will at some point in the future. And all of this is, done in the context of really needing to manage all of IT, which isn't just the features and functions you're using, but the security, performance, availability, reliability, and cost, or we call the spark of your IT environment. So as we look at that, our goal today is we're focused on productivity, right? And how do we define that, right? And I know that there's a formal definition about output of a process and goods in terms of goods or services with economic value, blah, blah, blah. That's great. When we talk about productivity for our businesses, we're talking about successfully and efficiently performing assigned tasks and functions, either individually or as a team. And really it's individually and as a team, right? That we want ourselves and our team members, our employees, our contractors to be individually successful in what they're supposed to be doing and efficient in the way they do it. And as a team, we want to work together in a way that for the overall, for teams within the company as well as the overall company, we're operating efficiently and successfully. And where productivity sometimes gets lost in the mix or can falter is you get, not atypical conflicts, right? And, some people say, hey, I'm working really, really efficiently. I'm getting a lot done, but the quality suffers, right? There's how fast, is it better to have it right now or is it better to have it right? How good is good enough, given the time frame and other demands on your work? Additionally, we want, to strike the balance between being successful and being meaningful. It's not uncommon to see a lot of people undertaking tasks very successfully, but aren't really adding value to the business or to the customer service or to operations improvements, things of that nature. So you want productivity to be, not just successful, but also meaningful to the goals and objectives that you have as a company. And additionally, a lot of times we see things undertaken for efficiency that work well in the short term, but aren't necessarily sustainable. And to sustain them over time actually requires additional investment or additional resources that you weren't expecting. That's not to say at times you don't want to allocate those resources or make those investments, but it should be a conscious decision as part of a planning process and not something you feel trapped or cornered or forced into in order to maintain the efficiency that you've gained by making changes to your processes, your technology, your procedures, things of that nature. And so we think about the elements of productivity, and this really goes to, in understanding the elements, we can look at, okay, how does IT support that, and where do we get those IT-based efficiencies, right? So we look at elements of productivity. We want to start off with the shared understanding of goals, objectives, and policies, right? So, employees should understand the goals and objectives of the company, of their department, of the team they're working on, of their particular job, and the organization should have policies in place that support that, right? So, for example, if if your company needs, for example, after hours coverage, you should have policies in place for how that's provided in an effective way for your customers, as well as a fair and equitable compensated way for your staff. And so those policies are part of how you implement those goals and objectives. And underneath that are the defined procedures and processes that people follow as they work through their daily tasks and functions. Some organizations and some efforts require more formal policies and procedures, or highly detailed process definitions and methods. Others can be more general in nature, but people should understand not only what you're trying to achieve, but how they're expected to achieve it. And the nature of your business will, really define how narrow or broadly those processes need to be defined. Of course, you can't be productive unless each individual and the teams that you build have the knowledge and the skills to execute. And they're able to do that within a healthy and supportive work environment. And so supportive work environment is pretty broad, right? Healthy and supportive is the physical environment they're working in. It's very important to the forefront now is, we look at people disengaging and quiet quitting, where they feel the work environment, they enjoy the work, but the environment's not healthy and supportive. So they, do what's necessary to perform their job well, but don't put in the extra effort we sometimes, demand or like to see. So healthy and supportive is pretty broad. And part of that is having the right tools and resources available for people to do their jobs, as well as the interpersonal relationship, the communications, the recognition, a safe environment, a secure environment. All of those come into play in healthy and supportive. And finally, within productivities, even as an individual, you can't be productive without the ability in most jobs to collaborate with others, and to have effective communications between yourself and teammates, or between yourself and your client, or self and your supervisor, yourself, your peers, self and vendors. Very few jobs someone can just say, hey, I'm assigned a task, I do it, I give it back. Even that is communications in how you receive the task and how you communicate your results or your output of your work. And so communications and collaboration come into key. And particularly now that long term, we expect some, most organizations have some form of hybrid work environment with people working offsite or remote versus onsite, either full or part-time or mixed schedules. Collaboration and being able to work together, even when you're geographically distanced and it's sort of the new norm, becomes even more important. And those go hand in hand, right? And so how does technology support productivity? It should do two things. It should empower individuals and teams to perform their jobs well in a way that they feel is healthy and supported. And in doing so, it should enable organizations to achieve their goals, right? And so it shouldn't just be, we want to do, we want to do task X following Y steps. Let's use technology to make that easier to do. It should also be, hey, we have this capability. If we use it differently or we adopt it, we'll be able to do more and enable ourselves to take on new tasks, new directions, new procedures, right? We talk a lot in the industry about digital transformation, it's not rocket science. It's effectively saying, given the technology we have or technology we may choose to implement, how can we enable ourselves to successfully work more efficiently and have better access to data, right? So how does technology support productivity? It provides flexible access to data. The data is there, it's centrally located. You have permissions and access controls for privacy and data protection and need to know, et cetera, but you can access it in a number of ways, right? It facilitates effective communication. In today's world, that could be phone, email, social threading like Slack or Teams, or Teams or Google Chat. Could be text messaging out to SMS clients, video conferencing, audio calls. The whole range, video snippets are all means of effective communication. And the effectiveness really comes, are you able to convey the information, and is it in a format that the recipient is able to receive and process it, right? Technology can support increased concentration as far as letting people focus on their tasks, eliminating, automating rote work and less sophisticated tasks, allowing knowledge workers to work on knowledge activities, supporting responsibility as far as tracking, managing processes, establishing accountability, tracking metrics on performance and results towards your goals and objectives, and of course providing that communication that still supports that sense of community, that provides that healthy and supportive work environment where, whether or not you're in person or remote or some combination, you feel connected to your peers, to your management team and the structure you work within, to the organization and to its mission and goals. And various technologies that we have today, particularly those bundled within the Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace productivity suites, really provide this broad support of productivity. And then we have the infrastructure behind it as far as internet access and decent client devices and secure Wi-Fi and things of that nature that provide the pathways, but it's really the productivity suite at the heart and those kind of services. And so when we look at that, there are a couple of areas where we look at how do you lower the price of that productivity. And the biggest impact we've seen in small businesses, and believe it or not, most small businesses still haven't finished this transition, is transitioning from file servers to file services. And when we talk about file services, we're talking about that traditional local area network infrastructure where somewhere in your office, whether it's a computer room or a closet or under someone's desk, you have a file server or you have multiple servers that run your infrastructure. They manage the domain, it holds your files, it has the print drivers that run the printers in your office. Things are connected, often by wires, sometimes by a wireless environment, and you've got these physical things throughout, right? And it's all local. And what you end up with is this physical infrastructure that, from a cost perspective, you have the hardware acquisition and maintenance, you have performance and capacity management issues, particularly around not just the processor and the memory, but the disk space, right? So when you buy, and the average small business file server today still runs between $3,500 and $6,000. So even if you say a $3,000 to $6,000 range for your average server, at the lower end, you've got your domain controllers that are special purpose. At the higher end, maybe application and database servers. In the middle, you've got your file servers, right? When you buy a server, you're looking at an investment you expect to last about 5 years. That's a typical life cycle for a server. So when you buy it, you're either buying it with the capacity you expect to grow into over those 5 years, or you're buying it with the capacity you need for the first few years and the infrastructure, the ability to expand in additional years, with the hope that the technology doesn't change radically enough that you'd still want to expand in that direction, right? So it's a huge upfront capital expense, and you still have additional costs around supporting the hardware. You need your endpoint protection. If you're working with a managed service provider, there's going to be a monthly monitoring and management fee to maintain the patches and monitor the hardware and the utilization to make sure it's functioning properly and you've got enough capacity. And if you don't, you have enough warning to be able to adjust that. You still need to have backup and recovery plans, not just restoring the data, but recovery of the machine should something happen. And depending on your business, you might need some sort of continuity solution, either in a disaster recovery type situation or in a redundancy environment, so that if something happened to the physical server or to your office, you can continue to run the business. And all around this, for a long time, this physical file server based local area network was great because we worked on site. High performance, high speed local area networking is great. The problem is now in our hybrid world, remote accessibility is slower and more costly. It's harder to secure. It's a different user experience for the remote people. If they're connecting to an on-premise server, you need more internet bandwidth. You're talking about VPNs or terminal server concentrators or Citrix farms, etc. And you get this inconsistent user experience with the people working in the office, use their applications and operate in a way that's very different from folks outside the office. And typically those remote workers, their productivity could suffer because the challenges of connecting into your location is very different than the challenges of connecting into a centralized data center. So when you move to cloud-based file services, you're centralizing everything, right? So your infrastructure changes. You no longer need the server and the backup system and the domain controllers. You need internet, you need your smart, you need your client, which is either a smart client device or a device with a browser on it, or it could be a netbook or even an older laptop or desktop that you can run the browser or the smart client software, and you need internet access. So your business internet infrastructure changes when you go from file servers to services along those lines. You have accessibility because your files are now organized in a cloud-based, with a cloud-based provider. Those files are accessible anywhere at any time, and the user experience is consistent. Access, performance, security, look and feel, all of it is the same whether you're in the office or out of the office. People who work hybrid, sometimes remote, sometimes in the office, don't have to log in and operate a different way when they're sitting in a cubicle or an office in your building versus when they're working from home or the coffee shop or their hotel room or the lobby of the convention center. It's all the same experience. And additionally, you then, because you've removed hardware, you've lowered device, and eliminated device management fees, the need for endpoint protection in the traditional sense. You still have to back up and recover your data, whether it's in the cloud or on premise. And all of the cloud services have a level of continuity included in the service, but you can enhance that depending on the need of your business. And so you're less likely, for example, to be impacted by a power outage or a snowstorm. Even if your office is closed because of a regional or local or even building specific disaster, if your file services are in the cloud, so long as you can get someplace else with internet access and you have a device, you have access to those files and those services. And that's key reason overall to move to cloud services and manage cloud services. It's particularly true with file services. So we look at file services, we want to optimize it, right? And here it's from the end of 2019 is a graph of the most popular cloud storage services. This is based on number of users at the time. And you can see I'm not promoting or saying one's better than the other. This is, again, an old, the snapshot is only 3 years old. It's more of a demonstration of the number of cloud storage services that are available to you as a small and mid-sized business. And so it's not uncommon for us as SMBs and smaller entities to say, hey, I need to be able to sync and share files, or I need to be able to share files securely with this client and sign up for services. And what we found is that most small businesses are using at least 2 of these services. And there's some more popular services now and some specialized secure services like Ignite that aren't on this chart. Doesn't matter, right? The key is that within your Microsoft 365 and your Google Workspace environments, you have a range of file services. And so paying an additional extra amount which can range anywhere from 12 to 15 up to $40 or $50 per user per month, isn't a good way to optimize your dollars. It increases that price of productivity, which is something we want to maintain control over. So when we look at Microsoft 365, they both have mechanisms for personal storage. And what do I mean by personal storage? Storage where the individual user has control over how it's used, how it's organized, and the permissions of the data that's in that storage. OneDrive in Microsoft 365 and MyDrive in Google Workspace serve that function. Both also have administratively controlled storage spaces where the administrator set up the structure at the top level, sometimes additional levels below, manage the permissions of that hierarchy and that structure. SharePoint in 365, Workspace, it's the shared drives, has that function, and both have team-oriented file services where the team manages the permissions, or the managers of the teams, I should say, have it. In Microsoft, it's called Microsoft Teams, and in Google, it's called Google Spaces. It's built into the new chat module. It's not as mature as Microsoft Teams and is broad in sophistication, but you do have file management in there as well. And so we look at productivity. You can balance your use of centrally versus personally administered storage as far as permissions, what goes where. All of these mechanisms have the ability to securely manage external sharing. So when you say, gee, I need to share files with my client, you don't need a third party to pay for a third party service to do that. You have the ability to do external sharing from these mechanisms with ease of access. Now, for people within your organization, obviously it's in the cloud. You can have the Drive for Desktop client or the OneDrive for Business client that gives you access to all types of storage. In the Microsoft ecosystem, the Drive for Desktop client gives you access to the MyDrive and the shared drive storage in the Google Workspace ecosystem. But you also have ease of access for external sharing that lets you provide permissions, users self-validate to get access to it. Both ecosystems at various levels of their licensing allow you to do sophisticated things such as prevent downloads and printing, or even limit the amount of time that someone has access to it and turning off the permissions automatically. So you can do fairly sophisticated management. Now, it's true that there's some very specific use cases that require different capabilities and features and external file sharing. Those are particularly for small and mid-sized entities like ours. Those are few and far between, and typically highly, highly regulated industries and very specific use cases within those industries. And so for the vast majority of us, leveraging the file services incumbent in Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace will lower the price of productivity. And again, we've seen, we were working with an organization about 4 months ago, about 100 employees. They had 62 Dropbox for Business accounts at $15 per user per month. And we simply showed them how they could do the same type of sharing and the same workflow within their Google Workspace environment using shared drives and MyDrive in some instances. And they were able to migrate off of that Dropbox for Business platform, saving thousands of dollars a month, tens of thousands of dollars a year. And so optimizing file services is a big hit. The next one we want to take a look at is optimizing calendars, because both Microsoft and 365 and Google Workspace have personal calendars. In fact, you can create multiple personal calendars if you want, and they both have mechanisms for shared team level and group calendars. And so you can have that shared calendar meeting space, and they all contain the common things like finding available time of internal confirmations, automatic inclusion of video or audio conferencing into the process. All of those capabilities are there. What was often seen as missing but now exists is that next level of how do I schedule appointments, particularly with people outside my organization. So in Google Workspace, recently launched, is called a feature called Appointment Schedule. Your administrator needs to turn it on and activate it, and then users can set it up. And in Microsoft 365 within Outlook, you have bookings with me. These basically function the same way as third-party tools such as Calendly, Schedule Once, now known as Once Hub, the scheduling component of HubSpot, the scheduling component of MailChimp, and many other calendaring services work. Okay, where you can set up the rules about when people can schedule a meeting, the duration, how much time you need, how much advance notice you need, how people get notified, do they get reminders. You can have multiple types of meetings that have names with different links that you can include in emails so people can click here to see your schedule. The same, you can have landing pages. All of those types of features that you see in the third-party calendaring and appointment setting tools are now within the Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 environments. Additionally, in Microsoft 365, particularly in the business tier licensings, you've got an additional app called the Bookings app. And the Bookings app is really designed for appointment-based businesses, whether it's a hair salon or a counseling office, things of that nature, or even if you're a store that wants to schedule personal shopping sessions, you have the ability to set up times and the rules about what appointments can be scheduled, and you even have options to tie in to collect payment at the time that the service is requested. And so there's a powerful, and it's branded to your business. It's a powerful tool that simply goes above and beyond personal scheduling. You can have someone say, hey, I need a haircut. I'm going to come in. I only want to go to Amy, or I can go to Amy, Bob, or Dave. It doesn't matter. Those types of capabilities. So we talk about lowering the price of productivity here. We see people paying anywhere from $8 to $30 per user per month for third-party calendaring services. On top of that, they have to integrate it so that it ends up on your Google or your Microsoft calendar, and that email notifications come from you, your domain, your DNS records have to be set up properly so calendar confirmations and emails don't get trapped as spam by the people scheduling with you. And you have to administer on an ongoing basis. It's more to onboard and offboard when someone comes or leaves your business. And those features change over time, and you need to keep them current. Even something, along the lines of changing your logo or updating your branding colors, you do it everywhere else. You got to remember to do it in the calendaring tool, as opposed to doing it built in. So there's a hard cost savings per month per user, as well as a soft cost savings as well if you look to optimize your calendars. Next area of optimization is meetings. Again, we understand that when the pandemic hit, feature and function-wise, Zoom had a clear advantage. And the reality is Zoom implemented features simply for free or at a lower cost than existing products like GoToMeeting and WebEx that had been around for a number of years. And so we understand why it became popular, why people jumped on board, and once they hit the limits of the free version, how easy it was to click and subscribe, right? But now you're paying money for that service, and the reality is the built-in capabilities for meetings has evolved in Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace, right? So you have them meetings built in and tied to your personal calendars, your shared team and group calendar concepts. In fact, in Microsoft Teams, you can initiate instant meetings through the chat mechanism, the activity mechanism, or you can actually do it through a calendar and schedule through formal invites. You have all of those capabilities. Google Meets is now working the same way. There's, automatic, if you have more than one person in a meeting, it automatically can create the Google Meet for you and provide that contact information and joining information as part of the invite and the confirmation. So they're built in to the core productivity suites. Additionally, if you use Google Voice for your phone communications, it integrates into the Meets as well as your chat and your messenger type services, just as Microsoft's phone service integrates into Teams and the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem. Voice and phone have additional costs because you're now paying for phone service. But the reason I bring that up is because when we look at third parties, we don't just see Zoom, WebEx, and GoTo anymore. We now see the voice over IP and the unified communication providers like RingCentral, Dialpad, Intermedia, Citricom, Greenlink networks, etc. 8x8, all of them coming into play, offering not only their telephony services, but they're offering the meeting service as well as private messaging and private chat or team chat as they often call it. And they'll integrate and they'll tout their integration with your Microsoft and Google Workspace integration. So the challenge here is that when you look at third-party services, not only might you be double paying for capabilities like meetings, but you have a lot of service overlap. Right? So for example, as a business, we operate on Google Workspace. We have DialPad is our voice over IP phone system. With DialPad, we have DialPad meetings. We don't use that. We prefer to use Google Meets, although when we're meeting with someone looking at Microsoft, we schedule it in Teams. Right? We have a Microsoft 365 environment as well, so we're operating in the environment that the person's considering moving into. So we're careful not to have overlapping services as that comes into play, and that can add cost as well. So we look at the cost of these third-party services. Again, they range very widely based on the feature and function set you need or the size of the meetings you need, and they're generally priced per user or per room. And we see prices ranging on an annual basis from $144 up to $300 per user. And for the room-based systems, anywhere from $300 to $600 or more dollars per year for the room. And what we notice, for example, is that if you're running, Google Workspace, Business Plus, right, and you need some additional capability of Meets that's only in the Enterprise Edition, the cost of upgrading to Enterprise Standard is less than the cost of then going out and picking a third-party tool to get those capabilities. So oftentimes it's significantly less expensive to upgrade the licensing for those users that need it within Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 than it is to go to the third party to get that comparable service. And again, these added costs we're talking about are the hard costs. You now need to worry about integration, administration, user synchronization, permission, security, etc. It comes out to be significantly more than that. So we've talked about moving from file servers to file services. We've talked about optimizing calendars. We've talked about optimizing meetings. And now let's talk about infrastructure, because we still see a lot of small and mid-sized organizations running on your traditional infrastructure. And here's, a representative diagram. It's not the same as your network, I realize, or many, but it's the basic elements, right? You've got physical servers, because you need access to your files and your applications, but to support that, you need servers to do your domain management, your DHCP for IP address allocation, DNS for routing, and for address resolution. At the same time, if you have people working remote, you need either a VPN capability or remote access capability built in. And maybe that's just remote to a PC, or maybe it's a remote access server or a remote access device, as well as you got to make sure you're backing up. You have some continuity and DR plans that are appropriate to your business. To support those wide variety of servers you need in place is the network, your firewalls and routers, switches, access points for wireless. Chances are you're cabled or highly cabled. Most of your use is on cable, physical wires, although you might migrate over time as people move from desktops to laptops, start using wireless a little bit more. And you have two types of costs involved. You have that capital expenditure for acquisition and capacity management. I talked about that earlier. Again, you got to buy either for the first couple of years with room to grow and expand in a path that you trust will be there when you need to, or you're buying the capacity for that 5-year window, even though you're not sure if you're going to use it or how quickly you're going to use it. And that has to be maintained. And you've got to protect that environment and have a way to recover if something goes wrong. You also have the operating expense per device for managed services. So your managed service provider is going to come in and say, yeah, we'll support your users. It's X dollars per user because we're covering that includes their PC, a PC or a laptop and their phone. If they have more devices, it's more money. It's X dollars a month per switch. It's Y dollars a month for each firewall. It's Z dollars a month for each wireless router, AA dollars per month for access point, and BB dollars a month for each server, or even different prices for different types of servers. And all of that comes into monthly fee. In our area of the country right now, remote monitoring and management of a server runs between $400 and $500 per server, whether the server is physical or virtual. Some charge a little less if it's virtual, but then you have to pay for the physical server on which those virtual servers are held as well. Individual workstations and users can run anywhere right now from about 140 to about 220 per month for the user and the device support. And so you have that op expense. When we move off of traditional and start looking at virtual desktop, what are we talking about? We're talking about having your servers in the cloud and having a desktop image that you use running on a server in the cloud. It's virtualized, it's remote, and what you have locally, what you're using your laptop or your desktop or a netbook or a Chromebook or your smartphone for, is basically what used to be called a thin client. We now call it, a smart client. You're running a client agent, an application, or you're running a browser. You're connecting to that remote environment where you're doing all of your work. And so effectively, up in the cloud data center, you've got an environment that looks like your on-premise environment used to look a long time ago. The difference is it's secure, it's redundant, it's resistant to disasters and failures, and you can connect in a high speed, highly secure, high performance way using devices where the local power that's physically in the device you're touching is used for that communications and the input output, the screen display, the keystrokes, the mouse movements. That's all that needs to go back and forth. And so your servers and your desktops, they're cloud-based. The advantage here is you're not buying a thing, you're buying a service. You can scale to need. And so you can have, if you have more users, you can add capacity and lower capacity pretty much dynamically. We even work in environments where, we know that most of the time, we've been working with one organization, most of the time they have 5 people concurrently in their accounting system. But occasionally there's 3 other people who need it. So we know that, we size their servers so they have one environment running that's able to support those 5 users, and that's always available. When additional users occasionally need it, we can spin up the additional resources. When they're done, we spin them down. And so they're not paying for those resources to be running all day during the business day or 24 hours a day. Similarly, you have a reduced infrastructure, right? Because you're really saying, I need secure, reliable access to the internet to get to the cloud. If you have higher security needs, you might still use a VPN overlay, but it's not always necessary. And so, we've worked with companies as they move into the virtual desktop, or Azure Windows Desktop, whatever mechanism we use to provide it, or that works best for them. Their on-premise network, you still want that physical firewall. You still want, the routing locally. That firewall will provide the DHCP, but you don't need the domain controllers and the network management and all that stuff. You need the firewall router, you need the switch, you need the access points for Wi-Fi, and you need your devices. It's a much simpler on-premise environment. And your client devices can be any format. We don't care if it's Mac or PC or Chromebook. And what we see is because you need less power and less capability in the device when you're connecting to remote desktop than you do if you're running applications locally, we can get more life out of those devices. You don't need to upgrade as often and as severely to be able to continue to do your work. And so you switch from this mechanism. You still have capital expenditures as far as that reduced network infrastructure and the device users are holding in their hands. But the rest of your environment becomes operational expense that we can fine tune and scale even dynamically throughout the workday and the work week to meet your needs and to avoid paying for excess services that you don't need and the ability to reduce services when the need reduces. And so businesses with annual business cycles see advantages, but even businesses with various work schedules can take advantage and lower their total cost of operation. And additionally, because everything's in the cloud data center, you're in a more secure environment, you're more resilient against security threats, disasters, be them local, building level, local, regional, or even national. And so there are all these other secondary benefits of not running your own physical infrastructure and including you need less people watching your IT, right? And you don't need people who on site or on premise who know how to replace a hard drive or validate that the memory is working in the machine. All of that's handled as part of the service you're subscribing to in that virtual desktop environment. And again, you're building what used to be all in your computer room and in your office space. You set that up within a secure, privatized, isolated network in a public cloud service. You access it remotely through that remote desktop mechanism. You get the high performance of the local area network, even though you're remote, and your user experience is the same regardless of where you are, and for the most part, regardless of what device you're on. So we talk about operating infrastructure, looking at traditional versus what we call cloud forward in our managed cloud services. You're reducing your capital expenditure needs. Your operating expense still has monitoring management, but it scales based on it scales up and down with your utilization as it goes up and down. A lot more flexibility. You're protecting fewer endpoints, physically endpoints, because you've built into services as opposed to servers. Your domain infrastructure, your basic business continuity and disaster recovery capabilities are built into the service, as our security capabilities that are very expensive to do yourself, as well as ubiquitous secure access. They're still supporting costs and services you need like you would in any environment, but so much is included in the core service that it is fundamentally a different economic model. And so when people look at the cost of running a mid-sized file server in the cloud, and they look at it and it's $180 a month if it's running 24 hours a day. Well, it doesn't need to be running 24 hours a day. If you make a 3-year commitment and are willing to pay a small penalty if you pull out early, we can lower that cost by 45, 50, sometimes even 60%. You compare that against spending $4,000 to $6,000 on the hardware, paying then to monitor and manage it, paying for all the add-on services that you don't need to add on in the cloud in the cloud environment. You do get a huge economy of scale. That's not to say it will always be less expensive for you. It will be less expensive when we compare apples to apples. Oftentimes, what we get when we move people into the cloud is a much more robust, reliable, secure, and higher performing environment what they're currently having today. So for comparable money or slightly more, they're getting, their Spark, if you will, go back to that original acronym, at a much higher level, in a much broader and much better set of services that will help their business survive, thrive, and grow. So we look at some of the architectural differences looking cloud forward. On premise, you've got firewall switches. We've sort of talked about this through, and systems requiring physical proximity often have to stay there, but cloud resident, you get, it's not domain management, it's now identity access management. You leverage VDI and remote desktops. You can have your database and applications either running on cloud servers or as services, similar with file services. You have your integrated email communications and that continuity and disaster recovery of the BCDR built in. And so I've mentioned a couple times, so really quickly, I know I'm already almost at about 45 minutes. What do we mean by managed cloud services? When we look at traditional managed services, you're being charged per user for things like help desk, per device for monitoring, management, and maintenance, which will be per device for your client, your servers, your switches, your routers, your printers, your access points, etc. And then you're going to pay some per service fees for things like backup and restore, maybe even some of your security fees. When we look at managed cloud services, there's additional efficiencies, as we've talked about to some extent today, but it's a consumption model, right? It's what does each user need to do on those per user services? There are some domain services such as DNS and security. You've got utilization, particularly if we're looking at virtual desktop or servers in the cloud, which are infrastructure and platform as a service consumption, or IaaS or PaaS consumption, it's called. And you've got infrastructure at in some cases per device or in aggregated devices as you need access into that model. We offer managed cloud services. Again, our cloud forward managed cloud services differ from traditional because if we can provision it using cloud-based services, we do. lowering the infrastructure cost and therefore all of the related capital and operating expenses. We start with our essential tier, which is our unlimited service administration, co-management of your environment and support, with advanced threat protection for your inbound email and your basic backup recovery for your data in Microsoft 365. That's sort of essential. Our most popular plan is our basic plan that adds endpoint protection for your physical and virtual devices, administration of multi-factor authentication and local disk encryption. This helps greatly with your security and protection against malware attacks and ransomware. And we bring in the remote monitoring and management capabilities of your devices, making sure you stay patched and secure and properly managed. And then our best value is our business tier, where we bring in managed DNS and web protections. This is added level protection against security threats and cyber attacks. It also assists with email deliverability, your emails not being seen as spam. We bring in the security awareness training. We monitor your cloud-based services for availability, performance, and security. And we have tools that help optimize the automation of your SaaS software and your systems, make it easier and more reliable to onboard and offboard employees, for example, standard email signatures, a whole range of services fall into that. In our premier tier, we get into third-party archiving of past users and detailed, comprehensive mobile device management. And so these, a traditional MSP is certain pricing, managed cloud services, because it's consumption-based and we're not dealing with as many physical things, comes in at a lower price point for most organizations. And you can see some of the numbers here. I won't, we're long, and I'm a little long in the tooth today. We're pretty far into the hour, so take a gander. If you have more questions about it, we're happy to ask. I just wanted to cover our managed cloud services briefly. So what is the call to action here? It's really as you think about your environment and what you're trying to do. Given where you see your business and what's happening with the economy and how you expect or worry it might affect your business, what are your environments and your needs? Are you ready to make a change? Are you looking to lower costs? Are you looking to improve efficiency? Are you looking to invest or even leverage the technology you have and identify capabilities that'll allow you to grow in the future as the economy strengthens? What are your objectives and your priorities? Because an assessment, working with us to do an assessment, we can take those goals and angle the assessment to meet that need, right? And we've certainly seen, businesses that have reduced cost at the same time, invested in some training or education so that, yes, they had to cut costs, but as the economy grew, they'd be able to expand their capabilities without making additional investment and allow productivity, individual and team productivity to increase and grow the business and delaying future reinvestment or future expenditures to keep up with the growing business and operate more efficiently and more profitably on the other side of the economic downturn. And that's really how you're going to define your value proposition. Take that holistic view of your IT services and how it fits with your business strategy and what you feel you need to do, given the various directions the economy and the markets could take, but also understand the cost of inaction, right? And knowing that doing nothing could leave you in a worse position than you are now. It can end up costing you a lot more money than it would have you made a change. And with that, we'll help you plan your solution and all the components of that SPARK acronym from the front of the presentation. And the key is to execute. So the call to action is to think about this stuff and then contact us. You can use the QR code on the screen off your phone right now, or bit.ly/CG intro call to schedule a short, no obligation, no cost conversation with one of our cloud advisors. We want to hear where you're at, what you're trying to go, where you're trying to go. If we can help and be part of the solution, we'll talk to you about that. If not, we'll help you find those right resources. And at this point, I know we're long here. We're almost 50 minutes into the hour, but I want to open it up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, no one's put any questions in the window yet. Use that question icon along the top or right-hand side. Or if you're not sure and you want to think about things and get back to us, the QR code's still there. You can contact us also at info@cumulusglobal.com. Myself or one of the teammates will answer. If you want to reach out to me directly, that's great. Don't call, even though I should take my phone number off the slides. I don't answer the phone if I'm busy or I'm focusing on something, and I'm horrible at checking and responding to voicemail. If you want a response from me, send an email. If I can't get you a quick response, I will ensure that a member of my team does get back to you. Okay, and so I want to thank you all for joining. While waiting to see if there are any questions, I'll go to the wrap-up slide. I want to thank those who are watching this on demand. Please feel to reach out with any questions or follow-up, or if you think we might be able to help you in any way. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day and week for joining us. Thank you for doing so, and we hope to see you back here in the future. Have a great day and week.